All right. Thank you for being here. Shaun Grant, spiritual advisor or spiritual counselor, actor, writer. What was the first for you between the acting and the writing?
Acting for sure. I always had this love for performance and using that performance to help people. And the spirituality was always there, or the writing aspect was always there, but it really kind of came in after I began to understand that I wanted to creatively express myself in an even greater capacity. So acting kind of led into that, which was really neat.
Was that when would you say your acting career started? Was it plays in school or where do you say
So
it starts?
yeah, I did one play in fifth grade called the Earth Day play, and I wasn't even like the top dog in it. I was singing in the choir, gonna have an Earth Day and stuff like that, and so it really bit me, but I kind of put it in the back of my mind because being an athlete was the thing to do, and so I figured that would fare out a lot better for me. And then after that didn't work out, then I found myself back in a space where the acting came back around. I would say back in 2004, I did a couple classes, sort of got the bug again, and then I stopped for 2 years because of Hurricane Katrina, living in New Orleans and stuff like that. And then I really went all for it in December of 2007.
What kind of acting classes do you need or would you recommend? Is it acting classes of how to get into character or acting classes about specifics of filming, like what the language is, what is hitting your mark mean, all that technical side that a director might want a person to have that initial programming to understand what they're talking about? What
Yeah,
do you think is more important?
yeah, that's a terrific question. I think initially both are right because you can feel like you're in another country if you've never been on a film set and you get on and all of a sudden you hear rolling speed, uh, camera, all these things, different terminologies for things. If you're unaware of that, you can kind of feel lost in the beginning. So I think it's important to familiarize yourself with that. And those classes are amazing initially, but I think also as well, really getting an idea to see if acting is for you. And I think one of the best ways to do that is just kind of get into one of those submersive classes that tap into improv, tap into how to break down a scene, tap into, more importantly, how do you interpret this? Because it's going to be you that is um it's going to be you that's bringing the character to life. So you, in those early on in those classes of scene study, script analysis, and breakdown, you're learning how to trust yourself and make choices that can bring your characters to life. So I feel like both of those are equally important. um, the one to learn the terminology starting off, and then the one to really break down and get more into the science of acting afterwards, and just continuing with that.
How much of that do you think you can get from reading about it versus being in a class and practicing it?
Well, I think reading literature is super important, and it it gives you a firsthand account in some ways, and it's important because you have an idea. But it's equally important to be in the thick of things because then you kind of know how it works in real time. It's almost like being a soldier and training for battle in combat, and then actually being in combat. Then you start to realize, okay, these are subtly different in a lot of ways, but as long as I'm prepared, I can do the best that I can and really make out well. But yeah, I think if books are what you have right now, it's a great place to start.
I can think of a few times in life where you have things that you've experienced through TV or reading about, and then things you experience firsthand
Yeah.
where you have that surreal effect of, like when I was in policing, I
Yeah.
remember in a pursuit one time when the car was wrecking in front of me, and I always thought I'm never gonna like put all my weight in both feet on the brake pedal. That's never gonna happen.
Right.
And then I had both feet on the brake pedal. There's flames, from the car hitting the Jersey wall, spinning around, pieces hitting the windshield, and you're
Hmm.
trying to go from 100 and whatever to zero in
Yeah.
that amount of time. And I was like, wow, this is like something off of Cops.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember thinking that, and I was like, okay. It's
Yeah.
then when I think about script writing and movies and TV and looking at shows that you like, and then reading the script of it and going, wow, it's a much different angle than
Yeah.
it. I didn't expect it to be like this.
Hmm.
And it's almost like the putting the blinders on so you can see what the camera sees versus what you see in real life.
Yeah.
So I can imagine being on a set, you're doing whatever scene you're doing, and the camera just sees this part, which is it's supposed to
Hmm.
see, but then you can see all these other things that are happening, and then trying to, as an actor, quiet the noise around you and get in that headspace
Yeah.
of being able to do this scene how you think it's supposed to be done
Hmm.
versus and having the director put in their parts, the the part that you're reading and the place you think this character is coming from. Do you
Hmm.
subscribe to the idea of method acting, or are you some other type?
I've dabbled in a little bit of everything, and I think method, much like the other techniques, can be great. But I think you just got to find out what works for you. And I personally, in my experience, feel like in a lot of ways, life is like the best teacher. And
Mm.
being able to take your own life experience and just delve that into the situation that you're in, and just allowing it to come up authentically and organically. Because the beautiful thing about acting is once you're in that environment, that world exists in every single way. Like, I did a military film, and I hadn't personally been in the military, but a lot of my family has been. And so my brother was military police for a long time, as well as a tech sergeant in the Air Force. And I talked to him a lot about different things and all that and stuff. And so I just tapped into that. And as soon as we started rolling, it just became so real. And I think part of that was a lot of just talking to him, but also saying, okay, what of my experience can I bring into this, and then allow it to just organically come through. And that's kind of what has gotten me. I I enjoy method acting and the Meisner technique and all these different techniques out there, but honestly, it's whatever helps you to hit that mark every time, and whatever you feel most comfortable with when it comes to the idea of performing.
I guess I don't know the all the different types of
Mhm.
words for explaining the ways of acting. But
Mhm.
is method acting where you're trying to put yourself in the position of the character and then using, I guess you would use, as you were talking about, your real life experience, even if
Mhm.
it's not exactly the same thing,
Yeah.
but to try to hit those emotional motivations and to put
Yeah.
yourself in that person's situation? Okay.
Yeah. It's so it's basically inundating you in situations, even if you hadn't experienced it on your own. Like, say, for instance, you're playing a doctor. Most method actors would probably go spend time in the hospital for months at a time, shadowing,
Mm.
a doctor. If the option is there, you would get so deep into it to the point where that's the only thing that exists. I find with method acting, it can be so intense that it even carries over off the screen, because you've just submerged yourself in that environment for so long. You're living in that world, right? You're now a doctor. There's not a world that exists where you're not a doctor. So I think it's a bit more intense. The problem with that is when you have a really, really powerful, polarizing, intense character, it's hard to really kind of get out of it. after it's all done, because you've just spent all this time and energy, infusing the attributes of this character into yourself. And it's just like, oh gosh, okay, now it's over. Now what? And then you're just like, okay, now I got to get out of this. And that it takes time, with method acting, you just can't click it off because it is you now. So you have to sort of evolve out of it. And that can take some time. So
Mm. It's like that classic problem of being undercover. You turn into what you are undercover being because
yeah,
that's what you are.
yeah.
And I see a lot in writing. If I'm just writing a novel and you're trying to separate the personalities of characters,
Hmm.
where at first maybe it doesn't seem like they're all, I mean, hopefully your characters have different personalities, but it seems like if you can't get to that, then you're forcing it too much and you have to pick another character or do another perspective. But it's when the story comes alive is when you can say, well, this is this character and they
Yeah.
wouldn't say this. Like if you can reread something during an edit and go, that's just not right. Why would it's out of character, if you will.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I can imagine seeing that in a script and having recently starting writing some scripts. I thought it was a different thing. Like I thought writing a book, if you had a book about something, you could just make a movie about it. And then
Hmm.
when you start to see the language of script writing
Yeah.
and screenplay and all that, you go, oh wow, this is, if you don't explain it, then the person making it doesn't have that perspective of it. They don't understand what that shot means or
Yeah.
what you're trying to get at. So you have to put a little bit of that in, but also make it entertaining. And I can
Yeah.
see more now how important an actor is,
Hmm.
because you can have great writing and a bad actor and it's going to be terrible. So you have to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
a
Those
good
two
actor.
have to come together like so well. And it definitely helps to have a director who understands the writing also, because having all these perspectives really gives the entire universe of the script substance. And that's what you want. That's when we see these really good films where they just kind of jump out at us because everybody, actor, writer, director, on the same page with the content, and they understand it on that level to where it begins to just sort of emanate this authenticity on its own because they've just invested in it so much, and there's just such a deep understanding. And so that's so important. It's a good point you made about the writing too. You start to see how, unlike a book, you're like, okay, I'm creating a whole world for this for people to really see, and then it's got to jump off the page onto the screen, and you got to have first great writers and you got to have good actors to do that, or else it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's so much more collaborative than
Mhm.
just writing a novel on your own, that
Yes.
you could listen to other people's ideas or consider things or not and just do it all yourself. But then when you're writing a script, and you have to kind of stay in your lane is a weird way to put it, but you have to
Yeah.
take into consideration other things like budget and
Yeah.
where you're going to shoot it and all that, just
Mhm.
because you don't want to make something that's not able to be made. You
Yeah.
want to be
Yeah.
realistic about it. So
Mm.
what are those, you know, what are the guidelines that you have to work within? But yeah, how much of how able or how much do you have to advocate for your view of what the character is
Mhm.
when if you get a script and you see something, you go, that doesn't feel right for this character. Do you
Mhm.
say something about it or do you just say, I'm learning? Or I guess it depends on how long you've been acting into
Mhm.
how much you say. I don't know.
Yeah,
What do you
no,
think?
I it's another great question. I think, like, so initially when you get something, what you want more than anything else is for it to resonate. Like, you want to the biggest thing is you want to feel so comfortable in a lot of ways, being able to think it, feel it, and then do it. And I feel like any director who really wants to create the best possible product will always listen to certain ideas that you have. And what I found in my experience is whenever I bring it to the table, one, you do it respectfully because you don't want to insult anybody's, talent or writing or vision the way they see things. But you bring it to the forefront. You say, you know what? I'd love to try this in a different way if that's possible, because it would feel more natural to me expressing it like this, but I could still work on keeping it in the context of the story. And so whenever I went about it like that, they're open to it. And then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do it more like it was written. And I was like, okay, well, at least you let me get a shot to try out what it is that I was feeling. In most cases, intuitively, if I feel something different, I'll go with it, and the director usually agrees, or the writer usually agrees, and we can kind of it works out. So I think you always have to voice how you feel about something to make sure that it's comfortable for you. Because if it's comfortable for you, it's going to look really good when it comes out on the footage.
Yeah, it's that collaboration part of it
Mhm.
that you have to approach it. I think the best way to approach it is what do you think about this? I mean, it sounds like I don't know, touchy feely, or just it's a non-committal. I don't know. It's You're trying to be polite to so many different people at the same
Yeah,
time that you
yeah.
go, "Well, what do you think about this versus this?" And so
Yeah, it's a sensitive
yeah,
it's a sensitive subject sometimes, and you gotta approach it with kid arms, man, because sometimes like people can be really, and understandably so, really sensitive about their creative content, and you want to accommodate that in a lot of ways without just flat out dismissing it, because we're all coming together for one objective, and that's just to create an awesome film or whatever project that we have at hand. So it's taking that into account for sure.
yeah. I like the script writing
Mhm.
because you're trying to explain your vision. Like if you're writing a book, you get a
Mhm.
lot more words to explain it. And
Yeah.
still, I don't like the idea of over explaining things. So I
Mhm.
really like script writing because it leaves some stuff open to interpretation. So you can think, okay, these are suggestions to the director,
Yeah.
and like pointing an actor in a direction, and
Mhm.
let's see what they have to say about it. You want to have some solid storyline in your head as the writer, but
Yeah.
also I think you can be open to ways to make it better, or some little tweaks that you just didn't see because you weren't looking at it from that way. So
Right.
yeah, collaboration
Right.
is. Mm. How long does a typical scene take in your experience? Just a maybe not action, not a lot of special effects stuff, but just a regular scene, an average scene, if there is such a thing. How long
Uh oh,
shoot
sorry, I
of
didn't cut you. I didn't cut you
is that
off.
a is that a day long shoot? Is it more than that? What do you think the average length of a shoot is?
It honestly, there's so many variables that go into that, and it just depends. It depends on how organized the production is,
Mm.
how prepared the actors are. Um there's a lot of things that go on. I'll give you an example. I did a film last year, and the scene previously, the one right before I was getting ready to do my scene, the guy had so much dialogue. I mean, like, this was like 3 or 4 pages of like essay type dialogue.
Mm.
And, I always feel for any actor that has to go through that, because it can just make your head explode. And so we got on the Zoom table read, and he was really getting it, and really just kind of just nailing it. And then we got on camera, and he started to struggle a bit. And he started, once you struggle and you start to blank out, you start to get a little nervous. And so, long story short, that scene took 5 hours to shoot, because at some point they gave him cue cards, and it just still, you got to get it to where it doesn't look like you're reading. And so it just took a long, long, long period of time. And so 5 hours had went and gone. And then my scene came up next. And thankfully we didn't have nowhere near that long of dialogue. But me and the actress I was working with, we had really honed in on what we were doing. And it literally took I would say 30 minutes to do 2 takes with maybe 4 different setups. And so that was pretty quick. And I think that like I said, those variables, whether, different setups, different, medium shot, full shot, close up, all these things, they all come into play. But I think if you're rolling smoothly, in most cases, you look at the call sheet, they're allotting 15 minutes at the most to be able to shoot a scene. Now, that doesn't necessarily always happen, but in most cases, it's like 15-minute blocks, maybe 20, 25 if there's a big action sequence or something like that. But it's mostly they'll give you like 15 minutes to get it done.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a new level of stress I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about when you just from the writing angle of I've
Yeah.
thought about the actual, like, how's this going to be paid for? Where's this going to be shot type of thing.
Hmm.
But then you think this scene or this page is going to take how many minutes to
Yeah.
get all the angles you want without being, set up for reshoots. Don't want
Yeah.
that.
And then also you take into account if you're running with daylight, so to speak, where you're trying to
Mm.
get shots in before the sun. It has been stressful at times, but for me, having meditation and being able to step away from the chaos and just really center myself has helped tremendously, because as amazing and wonderful as a film set is, and I enjoy it thoroughly, it is like high stress environment, because you're just trying to get it done. And when you get to these bigger films, you got producers calling in saying, okay, like, what's the time? Because, we're losing money if this isn't done at the 12-hour mark, right? And so they're dialing it in. So it's a lot of stress, but like I said, thankfully I've been able to integrate meditation in every way and just really kind of center myself through those stressful times, so I can still show up and do my part even in the midst of that stress.
Does writing help with your acting? Are you
Absolutely.
writing book stuff? Are you writing scripts? What kind of writing do you do mainly?
Yeah, I think in its natural sense, journaling, right, really helps you to understand um, yourself a lot better. I journal on characters all the time. Every time I get it, I because I really want to intuitively open up to see, what does my psyche believe. I mean, who does my psyche believe this character is? And so I do that. When I have written scripts, because I wrote a bunch back in the past, they really give you a deeper understanding of the ins and outs of the characters, like the objectives as opposed to the obstacles that they're facing. And that's a really valuable thing when you can understand that as an actor. You can get into a writer's head and understand that, oh, I really want this job to help my family, but I can't take the obstacle being I can't take being away from home. So then there's that conflict that happens. And when you can have that conflict versus resolution sort of idea in your head, and it's so authentic enough that it can show on camera, that's a beautiful thing for an actor. And it also helps the writer as well, because it's just going to help the script come to life a lot more. So I think I encourage all actors to, even if you don't even plan to shoot it, write a script, right? Get an idea of how many moving parts come in. And, that gives you a better understanding of not just what you're doing in the scene, but what everything everybody else is doing and everything that's going on. It really sort of hones your ability to be uh, connected and sort of experience this oneness with everything happening. And like I said, just these small steps makes everything look so much better when you finally shoot it, because when you're really delved into a world, to a universe that is a script, if you're really tapped into it, it'll show in every way. And it doesn't look like you're just acting, so to speak. You're actually living that experience. And writing is tremendous. Journaling, script writing, books, if you write articles, anything that would help you to get more in touch with yourself that you can bring to the story or to whatever script that you're doing, I think is magnificent.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent advice. The more perspectives you can see it from and consider in what you're doing, the better.
Yeah.
Because then it's, yeah. Plus, it makes you easier to work with,
Yeah,
and that's
for
good too.
sure. You come off so much more professional when you and it just helps your preparation, right? Like that's the beauty of it is you prepare and it shows so much, and then that's what gets you called back. And that's really important to know, like, in any arena or or occupation in life, nobody wants to work with somebody that's unprepared. Like that just it's kind of it goes without saying, but it's so much easier the way things move so much more smoothly when you've checked all your boxes and you've really sort of taken the time to say, I always say, act like it all depends upon you, but not in a space where it puts too much pressure, but in a space where it says, okay, this is going to motivate me to do everything that I need to show up in the very best possible way. And in doing that, it's always helped me to go the extra mile to make sure that I'm giving as much as I can to help make the product as best as it can be from my perspective and from my character's point of view.
Nice. Yeah, there's 3 rules for success where you have to have, if you can have 2 of them, you're in good shape. If you can do all 3, that's good, but you have to have at least 2, which is show up on time,
Yeah.
be good at your job,
Mhm.
and people like you. If you can have
Yeah.
2 of those, any 2, you're going to be successful. If you have all
Yeah.
3, that's going to be great.
I agree.
When
No, that's beautiful.
when
I love
you're
it.
when you're putting your books together, how do you what is the main type of writing you like doing when you publish your books?
Um, so I started off. I feel like I'm a teacher at heart. Like my soul's giving is as a teacher for the most part. So with that being the way that it is, for me, it's just about sharing experience or experiences. So the first couple books I did were just my experiences along a spiritual path and what I discovered and what I felt like was true for me that helped me to progress. And then it moved into from there a bit to the acting. And it was just documenting my experiences with acting and helping people to see ins and outs and grab insights that they might not have seen on their own. And so it's always that teaching or that sharing in the space of this is what happened for me. Maybe you can learn something from it. Maybe you can take something from it and progress your situation in a better way, or something that I went through can help you to expedite, your process. And that's always the objective is like, what type of wisdom can I share, whether it be intuitive or just from an experience? And that's kind of how I write. I just kind of tap into those times where I've had the blessing to be able to experience something that not everybody may not have at that point. So then the book shows them what to be ready for, what to possibly be ready for, and what to how to deal with certain things when it happens. It's mainly just I think the reason you write in some way, shape, or form is to creatively express yourself, but to also empower anybody that's willing to read the work. And as long as I can do that, that fulfills me on a really deep level because I love the idea of giving back. I love the idea of using my life to help other people.
What have you found are good sources of wisdom?
Mhm. Well, I think the wellspring is truly meditation. No one knows you better than you know yourself. And whether you believe in God, whether you believe in a higher power, whether you believe in Buddha, whatever it is, if you can just sit sit silently and just kind of go within. And it's not even, I used to think meditation was about going in and just getting stuff and getting stuff and getting stuff, but it's just really sitting in that tranquility of your being, in that space of your being, and just allowing things to sort of just come through, right? And more importantly, come up, because a lot of times there's just things that are suppressed and stuck that need to be released.
Mm.
And so when all these things come up, it teaches you about a better understanding of self-awareness. And when self-realization is kind of like your objective, it's sort of like, in a lot of ways, it helps you to really sort of gain the clarity of what you really want. And that's why I say meditation is key, because you just got to do it in order to understand how you have a whole lot of power. You have a whole lot of power to really make your life how you choose. And yes, you're working in the confines of a universe, but if you can tap into knowing yourself and understanding who you are and understanding what you were created to do and who you are in the most authentic sense, that opens up so much more in every single area of life. And I just love that. I love that I can take, 30 minutes to an hour in the morning and 30 minutes to an hour in the evening and just sit there and really just allow wisdom to come forth, right? And just open itself up. Another source is just experience, right? Just being able to be, I don't want to say fearless, but sometimes just have the courage to go and do things and learn something new about yourself, and then being able to share that. And also talking to different people, just getting to know people, you gain so much wisdom and experience from that. And you never know what somebody can share with you to really help you to see things differently, or help you to be proactive in your life in different ways. And so I think those three pretty much sum it up as far as wisdom goes.
All right. I was thinking the other day
Hmm.
about meditation and barriers to getting people into meditation,
Hmm.
because there is that meditation, like the Eastern mind of it, where you're thinking about nothing.
Yeah.
You want to empty your mind, and you have all these classes about meditation and yoga. And then I was thinking, well, how would I explain meditation to somebody? And I think what I mean by meditation is just reflection.
Yeah.
You just you're just thinking. You're
Hmm.
quieting your mind just means stop with all the distractions of
Yes.
everything around you,
Yeah.
especially now. Like back in the 80s, 70s, it seemed simpler because there was less distractions,
Yeah.
maybe, or maybe I was just younger and I didn't understand all the distractions that were
Yeah.
out there. But I think it's just be quiet for
Yeah.
a few minutes,
Yeah.
and then see what your mind is thinking on. Either you're consciously worried about it or subconsciously worried about it, or that's why I think reflecting on dreams probably helps a little, to where you can think, well, why am I dreaming this? What am I worried about? Or
Hmm.
what am I thinking about?
Yeah.
So I think that's how I would explain meditation to people.
Hmm.
Certainly, there's the other type of meditation where you're sitting in whatever position and you're just concentrating on breathing. But I
Yeah.
think the whole idea of that is to stop being distracted by things. And
Exactly. Exactly. I
mm,
totally agree with you. When you can shut out, and not even forcefully shut out, but allow things to sort of just subside, and you just sit in that silence, in that tranquility, all of the magic lies in the present moment. Our anxiety, our just uneasiness about life, is because of spending too much time in the future or too much time in the past. So for me, and there's the mindfulness sort of meditation that they teach, but mindfulness in itself is just a practice that can help really um, just eliminate so much of the anxiety that can come, because there's always stuff that we're thinking about, but meditation just really brings us back to the moment. And it really, for me personally, has helped me to see And this is just one of the things that I love. I always ask myself, okay, do I have everything I need in this moment? Have I taken care of everything to the best of my ability that I can? And if that's a yes, I can let all that other stuff go and I can just stay present, stay centered, and stay grounded. And I think that's what has been so life transforming for me, being able to build that level of mindfulness and being present through the idea of meditation and being consistent with it.
It's good. Yeah. Knowing what you think and why you think it is important. And you have to
Mhm.
have that space set aside
Yeah.
so you have that time to be able to think about what you think. I think
Yes.
that's why writing is so important, because writing teaches you how to think,
Yeah.
because you have to put it out on paper. So it's that whole idea of when people talk about it's just so much stuff in my mind. Well, the journaling is going to be the same way of doing that. You're putting it out on paper, whether
Mhm.
you're doing pre-writing or doing some sort of plot writing for a script or a book or whatever, that you're
Mhm.
putting it outside of your mind on sticky notes or on a piece of paper to try to visualize it all at once,
Yeah.
because you can't really inside of your head as easily. So I think
Mhm.
that's why writing is important. But
Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
There's a practice called Morning Pages by Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way. And the practice, I've been doing it for a while, and it's absolutely out of this world. And it basically, you just every morning, you when you wake up, you write 3 long form pages of content. Nothing in particular, nothing specifically, but you just write and you just write what comes out. And what it does, what I feel like it's done in my experience, is it's helped tremendously with blocks to my thinking, and more importantly, blocks to my creative thinking. Like where I've been stuck with certain things, I started doing this morning pages, exercise, and then all of a sudden, like that, I get the idea to be able to act upon it and just move with it. And so I think that in my opinion, the science behind it is that it just sort of frees up everything. And writing in a lot of ways is just intuitive, right? It's coming directly from you because it's your energy going into your hand to that pen. And it's really just unloading what you have internally. And that's the biggest thing with this exercise, is it's so therapeutic emotionally. Like you can wake up full of anxiety, full of just whatever, that's frustration, anger, fear, whatever it is, and you can start that writing, and by the time you're done with those 3 pages, you're like, whew, I feel so much better. And there's clarity there, there's peace, calmness, relaxation, all these amazing things. So I feel like that's a good practice. It ties into what you said. Writing is just, it's important. It's important for everybody, no matter what you're doing. I think it's important for everybody to write and really express themselves, even if it's not going to be something that they're going to put out to the public. But it really, in a lot of ways, I feel feeds the soul.
nice. I like to visualize a lot of things in in traveling or in driving, I guess, in vehicles, because
Hmm.
I think if I had to look back on my life and see the common thread that goes through everything, it's driving, whether it's a car, a truck, whether it's flying, sailing, any of that stuff. It's the journey, maybe that's in my head somewhere, of it's the journey and not the destination. But
Yeah.
I like the idea of having that space bubble around you when you're driving, so you're not in immediate danger. I mean, there's always danger, but you're not in the immediate danger. You have this little space in front of you, a little space behind you, space on the side. So that's that meditation type time that
Hmm.
you're setting aside so you can reflect on what you're doing.
Yeah.
But then also I like the idea of you're driving a truck and you're just loading up experiences in the back as you're living,
Hmm.
and sometimes they're in packages and you don't open them, but you just put them in there. You just put
Yeah.
them in there. And then that part where you're talking about this, the daily pages where you're unloading that, I think
Yeah.
the important part, because you have all this experience and all this weight on you.
Yeah.
And that's why you feel, or you hear about people that work a certain job for 30, 40 years, and then they don't work it anymore, and then they just die, is
Yeah.
because they have all that cumulative baggage,
Hmm.
stress, thoughts, experience, whatever. And they
Hmm.
just, once you are finished your trip and you're just, now you have to unload it, then it's just overwhelming. You're like, well,
Yeah.
I don't want to look at all that.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with it as you go. So
Yeah.
those
Absolutely.
morning pages, what a great idea of just, you examine that thing and go, okay, do I want to open this box and look at it more? Or do I just want to say, this is what I know this is. I'm going to set that aside. And
Yeah.
so often today, people put it in those words like, this is trauma or PTSD or whatever.
Hmm.
That's just things you deal with in life. Certainly, some people deal with worse things than other people
Yeah.
do. But you take that and you can just also visualize putting it on a shelf somewhere and just going, I know what that is. If I
Hmm.
ever want to get into it a little more, I can.
Yeah.
If I'm ever acting in something or writing something and I need to tap into what those feelings are, I
Yeah.
know where to go to get it,
Yeah.
but I don't need to get lost in it right now when I have all this other stuff going on.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense completely.
So the whole idea of stifling your emotions, it's
Hmm.
sometimes I think that's good. Maybe you don't want to over-examine them, but
Hmm.
then you need to examine them every now and then so it doesn't build up so much to this thing that you're this insurmountable thing you're not going to deal with. So
Yeah. No,
interesting.
I agree. I feel like for me, there's sometimes emotions that will just stop you, that will stop you from progressing and stop you from evolving into where you need to be. And so like those ones need to be dealt with because eventually they just run your life on some level. And, this could be childhood programming, this could be inferiority complexes, all these things that if there's anything that stops you from fully expressing yourself as you choose to, as you desire to, as the individual that you are, then I feel like that is definitely something that needs to be processed. And it's not a it's not something that needs to be like a world life event, but I think donating time to emotional health, just like mental health and physical health, is extraordinarily important, especially for us guys, because we're taught in a lot of ways to just suppress and compartmentalize, but then like myself, I had a lot of anger issues from my dad abandoning us when I was at a young age, and I suppressed it, and I thought I was channeling it into playing football and doing weightlifting and all these things, and I would get into these experiences where I would be so triggered that I would punch out a glass window, in the car or something like that, and you're like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? Well, it's because I was just suppressing that anger for so long, and so that was kind of one of the experiences that said, yeah, maybe I need to deal with this. The ones that can actually change the individual of who I know myself to be consciously, and deal with those issues that are underlying subconsciously. So I've I've tried to do my best with really sort of dealing with anything that could compromise who I am, my life, or anybody else around me. So
Yeah, life is a pressure cooker. So
yeah.
you got to let off that pressure every now and then. And
Oh yeah.
maybe when you were younger and you're playing the football, that was the way. I mean, it did
Hmm.
help, I imagine, at the
Yeah.
time. And then it's just one of those things where I don't think you stifle your emotions forever. You don't stuff them in a sack
Right.
forever.
Hmm.
But there are plenty of things that you can deal with a little and then put it away, not let
Yeah.
it run your whole life. Know it's there and then deal with it when you have the time.
Yeah.
And I think that age and experience, maybe not age, experience, it's just usually experience comes with age, but I know plenty of old fools. But the you get that experience because that helps you deal with emotion, because I feel like when you're younger,
Mhm.
emotion is the first thing that hits you of
Yeah.
any situation. It's how you feel about it. And I
Right.
think even when you're older, that's the first thing that hits you.
Yeah.
So then it's what needs to come right after that, or what I found helps is you have to develop a curiosity
Yeah.
of that leads to logic and reason. Like
Absolutely.
that this is emotional, it's hitting me and I understand it just
Yeah.
because this aggravates me or whatever. This is the thing that will drive me into action the quickest is
Mhm.
emotion.
Yeah.
And then I have to go, okay, now have I thought about this before? Have I had the experience of dealing with it before? And
Mhm.
if I haven't, have I thought about it, like seen somebody else deal with it or heard of a story of that? That's that wisdom building up.
Yeah.
And then that's the curiosity of why do I feel this way? What's my role in it? What can I do to affect it? Should I
Yeah.
be in this position? How do I get out of this position? What
Yeah.
just all those things of it. And that's where I think if you have the time,
Yeah.
writing helps that. Like if you do a
Absolutely.
pros cons list, that's pretty great.
Absolutely.
And you go, oh, and I understand it a little bit better now. But
Yeah.
I
I
think
love
that's
that.
one of the problems with society now is it's too much emotion
Mhm.
without the curiosity of what's causing it.
Absolutely. I think that's beautiful what you just described. I agree totally. You gotta everything you said is completely spot on because that's emotional is not rational. It's illogical in a lot of ways. So that's why I always find myself whenever there's a real strong emotion, I take the time to really kind of let it subside because I don't think you can ever make any true grounded or centered decision when you're highly emotional, especially through things like fear or anger. Um, you really have to take that time to really process it and really like work your way back to that centered rational place. And then you find, when you're always when you're calm and you're together, you can make the best decisions for yourself. So yeah, I agree with you as far as dealing with the emotions and everything you described.
Yeah. And I don't think you want a world without emotion. I'm not
Hmm.
saying to get rid of emotion at all.
Hmm.
Keep the emotion, but just
Yeah.
know how to deal with it a little better. It's kind of like going into the ocean. You have to hit those waves first, and those initial waves that's the emotion. But now,
Yeah.
are you over your head? Can you stand up? What are you
Yeah.
going to do after that? So
Yeah.
it's
Perfect analogy.
hmm. When you were writing your books, how did you approach writing those? Did you set time aside a
Mhm.
day with the idea of I'm writing a book about this, or how'd you approach your first book? I guess.
Yeah, so the first one that I wrote is a book called Divine Downloads. And I set aside 54 days. That number was just random. It wasn't like I was 54 is my number, but um I just set aside those days, and on those days I woke up at 3:30 in the morning. It was before work at 5:30, and I meditated for 30 minutes. And after I meditated, I just got up and I started writing. And I wrote a page of everything that came up on that day, just straight up intuitively. It was kind of like my morning pages exercise in a lot of ways, but and I just continued to do that and do that and do that. And then when I finally got to the 53rd day or 54th, um, I was like, you know what? I should take all of this and just turn it into a book. And so it became, I, my wife helped me put it together and it became my first book. And looking back on it, it was neat because I think if I would have tried to do it all at once, not just with this book, but with anything, it would have overwhelmed me and I would have quit. I would have just flat out said, I'm not doing this. But because it was just periodically each morning. And each morning I just have to do this task and bam.
Mhm.
And then the more you do it, the more it encourages you to stay with it. And you start finding opportunities to continue to roll. And before you know it, you've got a book. And so that book really kind of showed me that it doesn't have to be like super duper overwhelming like Stallone, who wrote Rocky in like in one night or something like that, or 24 hours. Um, it just helped me to say, okay, just devote some time to it each day, And then for me, that was a chapter. Sometimes if I was feeling good, 2 chapters, and then I just go to the next day and do the same thing. And then eventually what happens is you've got a work that's ready to be edited and then put out there and published. So it's always been periodic for me as far as setting up like a structure of organization where I could do sections of it brick by brick by brick, and then finally, everything is built from there.
So that's still how you approach it now? Have you tweaked any of your through other
Yeah,
books or other writing?
I know it is still the same way, because the thing is I feel like as long as I'm following intuitively what's coming through and not trying to just pack, because I think like a lot of times with books, and you can see this, editors will be like, well, you got to add more to this chapter, you got to add more to that chapter, you got to do this, well, this needs to be longer. And so for me, it was just like, I just want to say what needs to be said, and that's it, right? And so
Yeah.
that could be a chapter and a half, that could be a half a chapter, couple paragraphs, whatever it is. But as long as I get out what I need to say, and I always have a sense of knowing what it is that I wanted to say internally, once I get that done, and I was like, okay, I'm done. And then I'll come back the next day and just repeat that process. For me, it just keeps me from like wanting to fluff it up and just kind of add stuff in there to make it, longer or whatever. I've never really believed in that. But more or less revealing what I felt like was true for me at the time.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's one of the things I like about the self-publishing
Mm-hmm.
through Amazon is the main
Yes.
one I use, that it just makes it easier because you are to put it in the film term, you're the auteur of the book.
Mm-hmm.
You're everything. You get to make all the decisions about it.
Yes.
And if you're writing it by yourself, and you get to pick the length and everything. I've read plenty of books, especially when it seems like into like self-help or coaching books,
Yeah.
that you read the first third of it and you go, great stuff.
Yeah.
And then you read the second third and you go, this seems oddly familiar.
Yeah.
And then you read the last part and you're like, this is just the same stuff over
Yeah.
again in a
Yeah.
different way that's not necessarily better. Because if it was
Mm-hmm.
a different way that was, added some more to it, I'd be okay with it. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of those books could be a lot shorter. And
Absolutely.
maybe that's the good thing about people's attention spans being shorter now is
Yeah.
you can write a shorter book.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And I just think it's the publisher saying, well, we got to make this longer. Like, okay, it's 120 pages, but you need to make it 160. And then the writers just kind of, they lose that or organic expression in a lot of ways, because you're like, okay, well, I just got to fill this up. Let me come up with something, as opposed to, this is what my soul is feeding me to be in this book, and it messes with the process. I don't think people care. I think as long as the book is, you know, impactful and empowering, depending on what you're reading, I think you can keep it at a shorter length than, however many pages the publisher wants. So yeah, for me, I've always tried to stay away from that. And you're right, self-publishing is perfect for that, because you write what you need to write, what you feel like you need to express, and then that's it.
I feel like stories, when they're in your head,
Mhm.
whatever type, fiction, nonfiction, poetry, whatever else,
Mhm.
that it's, again, I'd like to visualize things. So I visualize it as these containers that
Yeah.
are filled with the story.
Mhm.
And you don't really start writing until, in my experience, until the story is just like, hey, I'm ready, I need to be
Mhm.
written. So it's what you're thinking about all the time. It keeps coming up, it keeps coming up. And then hopefully you're at a point in your life where you're able to capture the essence of that story, because sometimes you're not good enough to write the story that's in your head.
Yeah.
You got to wait later. But
Mhm.
so you have this container and you start pouring it out. And at some point you become aware of, I think this is just an essay, or this is a short story, or this is a novel, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. That's
Yeah.
why I think it's important to write a bunch of different types of writing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm glad I started doing the script writing, because I think it makes my novel writing better.
Yeah.
I think poetry makes my dialogue writing better. So try all those different things. You don't have to be great at all of them. You don't have to
Mhm.
publish something in all of them, but it definitely affects the way you write whatever it is that you like to write the most. It's those tools in the toolbox that
Yeah.
you might be able to use this part in this story and this part in that story. But sometimes you're pouring out this container and it's if somebody wants more, there's just not any more. That's it.
Yeah.
There, that's that's the whole
Yeah.
thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think you make a
mm,
great point with different types of writing. It's like working out, right? You're initially
mm.
you go into the gym, you're not gonna be the best at power cleans or or whatever, squatting. But you stay with it. And what you find is you get better at it, but your squatting helps your leg press, or your power cleans helps your shoulder press. And same with writing. You're like you said, poetry helping your dialogue, and script writing helping you to write your books and stuff like that. It really is an amazing creative exercise for the brain, because I think it opens up different aspects of your brain to help you to be accessible to those other creative areas within you.
where do you think that creativity comes from?
I think, so I'm a deep spiritual believer, and I believe in God, not as like an old man in the sky, but as an all encompassing, infinitely intelligent energy that is just working through everything. And it's just this energy that just is, and it's flowing, and it's vibrant, and it's making nature do what nature does. It's beating our hearts and all these things, and making the blood flow. And I think creativity comes from that energy, because everything in life is kind of in that space of creation, of creating and evolving itself. And so I really feel like it comes from there. And so when we can tap into that, however that is, however you can get there, whatever strokes the brain into to being able to download that information, or wisdom in this case. I think that's for me. That's where I feel like it comes from. That, in my opinion, I think it's that infinite intelligence, that divine energy that's just giving it to you, and then allowing you to translate it in whatever way that you see fit.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, I can tell when I'm writing something
Hmm.
and when I am channeling something or like the
Hmm.
antenna for something. I'm not talking about Ouija board type stuff. I'm just saying that
Yeah.
maybe if there's, we're divine creatures and there's divinity in all of us and it's this energy that's passing through that you do tap into that and then you can go, wow, that's not what I normally think about, or I didn't plan on writing this when I started writing.
Yeah.
And that's pretty great. You get into that.
Mm.
I mean, some people call it the flow state or whatever, that
Yeah.
where the book is writing itself. That's pretty
Yes.
amazing. And then the
Yeah.
way things line up and you go, I don't think this is something that I did on my own. I think this is something else going on here. But
Yeah.
man, that's the fun part about writing for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's like a divine surprise, you
Mm.
know, especially when you get a chance to read back, look over it, like, wow, that's pretty neat. I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. And you can see that emotion in it. And then I think a lot of people maybe don't write because they think nobody's ever going to see it. I
Mhm.
don't think, I mean, my perspective is you could write and nobody ever see it. That's fine. Think
Yeah.
of all the people that had stuff published after they were dead that
Yes.
we hold in such high renown now.
Yeah.
And we never would have known it if they didn't write it down. Like Emily Dickinson saying, destroy all my stuff after I'm dead. And you go, whoa,
Yeah.
we would have missed out on some stuff, man.
I know, right?
And
Same with
so
what's his name?
many.
Napoleon Hill. He his estate didn't really explode until after he passed. And if and that's the thing. I think I don't think we write for accolades and for recognition and approval. I think we write because that's who we are, and that's who God wants to God wants to express that through us because, you know, who knows 50 years down the road who's going to read your book and all of a sudden it changes their life. And it could be for that very person. And the thing we get out of it, and I feel like I get out of it personally, is just the fun of creatively expressing myself. You know, something I got to hit on something, and I just said, okay, let me just create it. Let me put it out there. And for me, that's helped me to be even more creative in a multitude of things where I wasn't. I'm where when I no longer was looking for that approval, that you know, the likes, the follows, all this stuff. It's like, no, I got to hit. Let me just create it. Let me just follow it. And when you do that, you get even more stuff or more energy to create things because you're open to it. And it's just like, it's fun for me now. I'm happy that I'm there because I know it can be difficult when you're creating based on somebody approving it, saying it's a success or a failure. When you can just freely open it up and let it go, which is awesome for the self-publishing of the book, when you can just put it out there and be at peace with that and enjoy that process. That's absolutely epic for me. No doubt.
I think that's the commonality of humanity is aesthetic. That
Mhm.
I used to think, why do we bother making things that are aesthetically pleasing, that are beautiful? Why do any of that stuff? And I
Mhm.
think one, it's for you yourself, and
Mhm.
then it's for the creator. It's for
Yeah.
God would recognize it, the creator of everything creates.
Yeah.
So if we're in that image and uh, we can understand creativity, then
Mhm.
it's fun when you make something and then you can say that's pretty cool, and then you
Yeah.
can show it to somebody else and they go that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Whether you're just making a piece of furniture or you're routing the edge of a piece of wood to like
Mhm.
bullnose it so it's smooth, and then you sand it up and you're
Yeah.
like, wow, look at that.
Yeah.
That's that's interesting. I like the right angle too, because you
Yeah.
wouldn't realize this without the right angle, but
Mhm.
that's pretty cool. And what if I did this many times in a building and then you end up with a cathedral and you're like, oh, that's why they made it, because
Yeah.
they just were like, well, what if I go one step further with this? What if I go one step further with this? And then with the idea of writing or creating anything, that you can appreciate it yourself, but if you have that faith that there is a creator and there is a God, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call him, that you're sharing that between them at least. Like
Yeah.
you can go, hey God, look at this. Look
Yeah.
at this thing. And then it's
Yeah.
even more mystifying because you go, I'm I'm showing this thing that I feel like I created to a thing that created me and everything.
Mhm.
And then you start to go, wow, I'm really thankful for being able to be here to do this, to
Yeah.
see this, to understand it. And I think that's where you get the gratitude of life when you start reflecting on those things. And
Absolutely.
I don't think we're, as a whole, as people, I don't think we recognize that enough, that we
Yeah.
don't recognize how lucky or be as grateful for life as we are.
Mhm.
Wow.
So true.
Things to
So
think
true.
about.
Yep. Truly. Truly, truly, truly.
Well, then, what is next for you on your creative ventures?
Okay. Let's see. Next for me, I have a film coming up here on the 17th. It's a film based off of a video game called Vice Heist, and I'm playing a treasured member of the mafia, which is out of range, not out of range, but a further range from who I am, which is fun. So I'm excited about that. You know, I'm always wide open to doing videos. I write, I do voiceovers. You know, honestly, for me, every day is just finding the very best way to be open to what comes through and then allowing that to emerge. And I think from an organized standpoint, the movie is the next thing, but who knows what can happen, you know, after we get off here or later in today or whatever comes through. You know, I try and honor it in every way because, you know, that's what the true creative expression journey is about. It's just honoring what emerges. And so yeah, it's a day-to-day, moment-to-moment type thing for me.
Nice. What's the best way for people to follow your work and see your books and things like that?
So you could follow me on Instagram, which is IAMSHAUNGRANT. Um, if you follow my profile, the books, every book that I have is in the link in my biography, so you can access those there on Amazon, and then there's a few of them that are on iBooks, I believe, so which is one of my favorites. But yeah, Instagram will give you access to everything. That link tree, um, that link tree link in my biography will lead you to all of the books and movies and all types of creative stuff.
Okay. In the show notes, I'm going to have that link tree link and then your Amazon authors page because
Yes.
people can follow that and then
Yeah.
you can see all the books, not just one.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Any anything you wanted to talk about that we didn't, or any thoughts in closing?
Um, I don't think about. I think we talked. We had a good talk about creativity and emotion and a little bit of spirituality there. So I think we touched on a lot of different things. Um, I can't think of anything right now if I'm missing because it seems like we've had a quite a thorough, in depth conversation. But how about you?
Um, it's good. I always like talking about creativity, and I could talk about that for a lot longer, but
Yeah.
I think we covered it well. It's good to start on. Hopefully, everybody can have some moments in their life where they can be quiet and
Yes.
just reflect. I can't remember. It's a quote from some movie. I feel like I can't even remember the movie it was or the actor that said it, but it's something like there's nothing wrong with a little quiet. I
Yeah.
think that might have been a Kevin Spacey quote from House of Cards,
Mm,
or or it was Nick Nolte or somebody like that. But
yeah.
whoever it
Either way, it's
was,
a
it's a
great.
good message.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolute great message. And
Consider the message and not the source.
absolutely. Absolutely. No,
All
I
right.
love
So
that. I think quiet also, taking time to really be silent helps you to be grateful for everything, because we talked a bit about society and, a lot of ways, in a lot of ways, society is geared towards, drilling into us all that we don't have, but then it kind of distracts us from understanding and appreciating all that we do have. So by stopping and really taking a moment to silence yourself, quiet yourself, meditation, prayer, whatever it is, you could really step into a level of gratitude that can bring a lot of peace, can bring a lot of just happiness in general for the journey that you've been on and what you've been able to overcome and realize as your life right now. So I think that's equally as important, to have that gratitude, um, in relation to just taking the time to meditate, taking the time to stop and just sit in your own silence, sit in your own quiet.
well said. I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit.
Okay.